Hi everyone, today we are going to go over the study guide for our Chapter 5 test. Please remember that you are expected to take your test during your scheduled geometry period. Check Polaris for the exact times for each period. Now the first part of the study guide is all vocab terms. So for number 1, the circumcenter of a triangle can be located by finding the point of concurrency of the perpendicular bisectors. This point will be equidistant from each of the triangle's vertices. Number 2, the incenter of a triangle can be located by finding the point of concurrency of the angle bisectors. This point will be equidistant from each of the triangle's sides. Number 3, the centroid of the triangle can be located by finding the point of concurrency of the medians. This point will be the balancing point of the triangle, and the centroid will be 2/3 of the way from the vertex to the midpoint of the opposite side. And finally, the orthocenter of a triangle can be located by finding the point of concurrency of the altitudes. We are given that ray OS bisects angle POR. Find PS if TS is equal to 12 and TR is equal to 16. This is not drawn to scale. All right, so let's start by plugging in what we know. So TS is this spot right here, which is 12. We know that TR, which is this segment right here, is 16. We want to figure out what is PS. PS is this segment right here in red. All right, so this goes back to the beginning of Chapter 5. You actually had a question like this on the 5.1 to 5.3 quiz. So since we know that this is an angle bisector, that means this ray is going to be equidistant from point P and point R, meaning that these segments are congruent. So now if I were to highlight RS, you would see that I have a right triangle. So I'm going to redraw this. And I have 12, 16, and this X is what I'm going to be searching for. That X is RS, but we know if we figure out what RS is, we also know what PS is. So if I have a right triangle, to find the hypotenuse, which in this case is X, I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem. So Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. The only one that really matters here is that c value, which in this case has to be X. A and B can be either 16 or 12, it doesn't matter. So I'll do 12 squared plus 16 squared. Now I can just plug that right into my calculator. So 12 squared plus 16 squared equals 400, which is X squared. Now I don't care about X squared, I want to figure out what is X. So I need to do the square root of each side, and I end up getting that 20 is equal to X. All right, WY is the midsegment of triangle QRS. We want to find the values of X and Y. All right, so remember midsegment means it's the segment that connects two midpoints of a triangle. So we'll start with the easy one. If QW is 48, that means that Y would also have to be 48. Why? Well, W is a midpoint, hence that's why this is a mid-segment. So those have to be congruent. So I'll write that down, that Y is equal to 48. Next, we want to figure out what the length of X is. So X is right here. Now let's review how the mid-segment compares to the third side of the triangle. Well, one is that they are parallel. Are those segments congruent? No, they're not. And if you look at them, you would see that WY is shorter than RS. Well, how much shorter is it? Well, it's half the size. So if this is half the size of RS, To figure out what RS is, I just need to multiply it by 2. So that means that X then is going to equal 68. A triangle has one side of length 10 and another of length 6. Describe the possible lengths of the third side. So there's going to be two scenarios here. So let's draw our first triangle. So we know one side is 10, one side is 6, and the other side is X. So the first scenario is going to be that 10 is the longest side of the triangle. Well, if 10 is the longest side of the triangle, that means that when I add up my two shorter sides, they need to be larger than 10. So let's write that down, that X plus 6 needs to be greater than 10. All right, so let's solve for X, and I'm going to do that by subtracting 6 from each side, which means that X has to be greater than 4. That's our first part of our answer. Now let's look at our second scenario. So I'm going to redraw my triangle, 10, 6, and X. And in this case, we're going to say that X is the longest side of the triangle. So that means my two shorter sides, 10 and 6, when you add them up, they need to be greater than X. So let's write that down, that 10 plus 6 needs to be greater than X. Well, 10 plus 6 is 16. Is greater than X. So those now I need to combine into one inequality. And my X value needs to be some number between 4 and 16 for this to actually create a triangle. So that means that X has to be between 4 and 16, and we write this like this, that 4 is less than X, which is less than 16. So this would be my final answer, and this is what you would use. So X is between 4 and 16. Here's another question about the midsegment. So WY is the midsegment of triangle QRS. Find the values of X and Y. All right, so let's start with our easy one first. So if Y is a midpoint, what is the value of X here? Well, we know those are the same, so X has to be equal to 12. Now let's look at this Y value here. We know that WY is a midsegment. So if QS is 20, what would Y then have to be? Well, it would have to be half of 20, which is 10. All right, next we're going to find the value of X. All right, well, if I look at my diagram here, I notice that WY is a perpendicular bisector. What is a perpendicular bisector? Well, it bisects a segment in half, and it also collides at a 90-degree angle. So since we have a perpendicular bisector, that means that these two sides here are congruent. So if I want to solve for X, I'm just going to set 2X equal to 16, divide by 2, and X then is equal to 8. Use the information in the diagram to find X if the measure of angle ABC is equal to 90 degrees. All right, so a few things here. Ray BD. I know that angle ABC, this entire angle here, is 90 degrees because it told me this in the information. If angle DBC is equal to 45, that means that this angle is also equal to 45 because they need to add up to 90 degrees. BD then is an angle bisector. Why is this important? Well, if this is an angle bisector, that means that point D is equidistant from point C and point A, meaning these segments are congruent. So I'm going to set those equal to each other. 12 is equal to X minus 8. Add 8 to each side. I end up getting 20 is equal to x. Triangle ABC, Q is the centroid. If QC is equal to 12 and NQ is equal to 5, find CM and AN. So let's mark what we know here. QC. So QC is equal to 12. And we know that NQ, which is right here, is equal to 5. All right, so CM is this entire segment right here. Well, let's think about our trick for centroid. If CQ is 12, and we know it's 2/3 of the entire length, that means that QM is 1/3 of the entire length. How do they compare? Well, CQ is double the length of QM. So to find the length of QM, I just need to divide CQ by 2. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. So what is the entire length then? Well, 12 plus 6 is 18. So CM is equal to 18. All right, let's figure out the length of AN. So AN is this entire segment here. Well, if we look at NQ, which is red, we know that that length is 5. That's the smaller segment. So what does that mean that the longer segment QA is equal to? Well, we just double the smaller segment. So that means that QA, which is in red now, would have to be 10. So if I want to figure out this entire length, I would just add up 5 and 10 together. So AN is equal to 15. List the unknown angles in order from smallest to largest. So we need to remember that the smallest angle is going to be across from the shortest side. Well, what's the shortest side? It would be 18 CA, which if we find the angle that is opposite, it would be angle B. So angle B is the smallest. Next, we need to find the medium size length side, which in this case is 24. So the opposite angle of 24 would be A. So that's our, so A is our medium size angle. And then finally, our largest angle would have to be angle C, which is 90 degrees, because it's opposite of the hypotenuse, which we know is the longest side of a right triangle. Is it possible to construct a triangle with the given side lengths? Explain. All right, so let's look at the first part here. We have 3, 7, and 9. To determine if it's possible to construct a triangle, we need to look at the largest side length, which in this case is 9. Then we need to look at the 2 smaller side lengths and add them up. So 3 plus 7, is that greater than 9? It is. So 10 is greater than 9. So yes, this will construct a triangle. All right, so let's look at the next part. Our largest segment is 10. So 4 plus 6, is that greater than 10? Well, 4 plus 6 is 10. Is 10 greater than 10? No, it's not. So this would not create a triangle. Those sides would collapse on top of each other, creating a straight line. So a triangle would not be formed. 2, 7, and 10. 10 would be our largest side length. Is 2 plus 7 greater than 10? So 2 plus 7 is 9. Is 9 greater than 10? No, it is not. So this would not create a triangle. Finally, our largest side length would be 11 on this triangle. Is 5 plus 7 greater than 11? Yes, it is. And so this would work. Here's another mid-segment question. So WY is the mid-segment of triangle QRS. Find the value of X and Y. All right, so we know that W is a midpoint and Y is a midpoint because WY is a midsegment. So that means that these two segments are congruent. So I'm going to set those equal to each other. That 40 is equal to 2y. So if I want to get y by itself, I'm just going to divide 2 from each side, and I end up getting that 20 is equal to y. Next, I want to figure out what the value of x is. So I'm going to outline my midsegment and the third side. How do they compare? Well, the midsegment is half the length of the third side, which means if I multiply 2 by 30, that would make my midsegment the same length as my third side. So 2 times 30 is 60, which is equal to x plus 10. If I subtract 10 from each side, 50 then is equal to x. WY is a midsegment of triangle QRS. Find WY and WS. All right, well, WS is right here. And we can easily find that because we know these are the same. So WS would have to equal 3. And I will also write that here. WS is equal to 3. All right, so now we're going to look at the midsegment and the third side. So here's my midsegment compared to my third side. Once again, the midsegment and the third side are not congruent. The midsegment is half the length. So if I want the midsegment to be the same length, I need to multiply it by 2. So 2 times my midsegment, which is 2x plus 8, will equal the third side, which is 19. I then am going to distribute inside the parentheses, which gives me 4x plus 16 is equal to 19. Subtract 16 from each side. I get that 4x is equal to 3. And I end up getting that x is equal to 3 over 4, 3/4. But that's not what it asked. It asked, what is the length of WY? So if I plug 3/4 into the x value for my equation for my midsegment, so 2 times 3/4 plus 8. If I plug that into my calculator, I end up getting that WY is equal to 9.5. So I'm done with that question now. Use the information in the diagram to solve for x. Well, I see I have an angle bisector here because those angles are the same, meaning that this point is equidistant from those 2 points. So these segments are then congruent. So I'm just going to set these equal to each other. 3x minus 5 is equal to 2 times the quantity, x plus 10. So this part of the equation does not simplify. However, this will, because I can distribute that inside the parentheses, and I get 2x plus 20. Let's add 5. Add 5. So 3x is equal to 2x plus 25. Subtract x from each 2x from each side. I end up getting that x is equal to 25. List all the angles and sides in order from least to smallest. Well, first I need to figure out what is the measure of angle A. Remember, when you add up all the angles, it equals 180 degrees. So this has to be 45 degrees. So if I'm looking at my angles, the smallest angle is angle A. Then we go to angle C, which is our medium size angle, and our largest angle would be angle B. Now let's look at the sides. Angle A is our smallest angle, and opposite of angle A would be side BC, so that is the shortest side. Angle C is our medium size angle. If I look across there, I get AB, so that's going to be our medium size side length. And finally, angle B is our largest angle measure, which means AC is our longest side. In the diagram, the perpendicular bisector of triangle WXY meet at point Z. Find WZ. All right, so if this is the intersection of our perpendicular bisector, we know that that is the circumcenter. So that means that this segment, and this segment are all congruent because the circumcenter is equidistant from our vertices. Remember, these are the vertices. So WZ then, which is this segment right here, also would have to be 5. So WZ is equal to 5. And our last problem for this study guide, in the diagram, the perpendicular bisector, oh, I'm sorry, I read the wrong question. Use the information in the diagram to find X. So once again, we have a angle bisector here, and I see that because of these markings, those angle measures are the same, meaning these sides are the same. So 2x plus 2 is equal to x plus 12. Subtract 2, subtract 2. I get 2x is equal to x plus 10. Subtract 1x from each side. X then is equal to 10.